Hey everyone, this is Mehak, and we are back with yet another session of Success Story. And today we have with us Pulkit. So, hi Pulkit, how are you?
Yeah, hi Mac, I'm fine. Thank you for inviting me into this channel.
Like, okay, Pulkit. So, briefly introduce yourself, please.
Sure, Mac. So I'm a 2020 computer engineering graduate from Jamia Millia Islamia New Delhi,
Okay,
and post my course completion, I actually interned at two companies, Newgen, and then I held an apprenticeship role at Epicero before moving
okay,
to my full-time role at Blackhawk Network India from number 20 onwards. So I have been there since then.
cool. Okay, Pulkit, how did you get into this line of coding? What motivated you to join it?
So Mike, engineering meant computer for me mainly because I think of the glamour back when I was in 12th. Uh, I think that's how it started. I opted for the course of computer engineering, and since then, opposed that, it was seeing the various success stories. So in college, you are exposed to a lot of success stories of people getting
Hmm.
placed in great companies and having great work to do. So once in, that became the primary motivator to eventually be placed in a product company and maybe contribute to great code myself. So yeah, that was the line of thinking that got me into the coding and persisted. That persisted, and the saga continued. So on. Yeah.
Okay, so coming back to the interview of your Blackhawk, so what was the eligibility criteria for it? Was there any minimum CGPA involved?
No, Mac. There was no CGPA cutoff to the best I
Okay,
can recollect. Uh, so I will just clarify one thing. I was referred to Blackhawk Network by Coding Block itself.
okay. Hmm.
So once I was referred, the coding test was in my mailbox. So uh, I don't think there was any other criteria involved back then other than that. But yeah, I was
Okay,
referred to by coding block, so that might
okay.
have started.
Okay. So, what were the questions? What were the rounds were there for the interview?
So yeah, post the written or the coding round, which actually had a mix of DS algo questions
Hmm.
and a question on HTML. So you had to build an HTML form with certain checks on the email field,
Okay.
and there were a couple of SQL questions. So that actually
Okay.
comprised the complete coding test. So once you clear that, three face-to-face interviews were in the pipeline. The first face-to-face interview was with a senior software engineer from Blackhawk,
Okay.
and it
Okay.
was a completely DS algo based interview. So
Okay.
it started with basic concepts of Java, OOPS, and the interview was just trying to establish conversation before we
Okay.
dived it
Hmm.
into a question, a problem-solving question, which was based on the pattern of merge intervals.
All
So
right.
in the
Hmm.
problem solving section, we actually first discussed the approach. So once the interviewer was convinced with the approach, he asked me to code it on a online collaborative platform. And then
Hmm.
there were basic questions like, what is the time complexity, the space complexity, and a basic dry run of the code that followed. So yeah, that was a quick first round. The second round was with the engineering manager from
Okay.
for the
Hmm.
team I was being interviewed to join. And it was again heavily based on DS algo and problem solving. But when I say heavily, it was the complete round based on that. It started with linked lists, and uh, problems were being built on that. So the first question was a very basic thing: implement a linked list, and let's say the language I'm comfortable with. So I use C++. So
Okay.
post that,
Hmm.
he kept on giving me methods to implement within the entire class, like let's say reverse a linked list by passing the head node, for instance. So the entire second round was actually a collection of 5 to 6 questions, all based on linked lists, and lasted an hour. Uh, that being said, the interview wasn't the 1 hour time. Even though it got exhausted, the second round wasn't over, and the interview decided to actually carry over the second round to third round. So the third round was actually uh, a collection of two things. The first part was the problem solving. The second
Okay.
part was actually a cultural round with the director of engineering. So in the third round
Okay.
again, like I said, questions will be built from the previous report. So the interviewer had preserved the code I had written in second round. So I
Hmm.
actually started from that point. He gave me 2 3 questions more. It was a very casual conversation. It was a very fun conversation about the problem he gave in third round. So post
Okay.
that, it
Hmm.
all shifted to the die shifted to the director of engineering's uh, plate, and then then on, it was mainly a casual conversation, like um a cultural fit and behavioral round. What you can expect in a cultural fit and behavioral round. So yeah,
Okay.
these were the 3 rounds which actually happened for Blackhawk. So post the third round, the offer came in a few days later.
Cool. Okay. So, how did you prepare yourself for this interview?
Yeah, Max. So since naturally in a fresher role, the focus is mainly on PSDS, problem solving data structures.
Hmm.
Uh, for that front, I was in the course of coding blocks, carrier bootcamp course, which actually first prepares you for data structures and algorithms, then prepares you for development as well. The section in which they prepare you for DS Algo is more than enough to crack, I think, a majority of product-based companies out there. I think uh, it's very comprehensive, and my instructor, who was Karthik Mathur sir from Coding Blocks, he actually gave us a very deep dive into every concept behind these DS and algos. So
Hmm.
once you understand the concept, once you understand the patterns, coding interviews becomes easier, because then it does not become a zero sum game of actually memorizing the problems. It becomes a more critical thinking game of being able to apply those patterns and concepts, which it becomes more fun to interview. So yeah, I think DS
Yeah.
Algo was sufficient for what I was taught at the Carry Bootcamp course from Coding Blocks.
Yeah.
Uh, I think development wasn't asked much, so yeah, that sufficed for me to get into Blackhawk. To be honest, yeah.
Okay. Great. So, any last advice that you like to give to the students who are preparing for the interview?
Yeah, Max. So one of my biggest learnings from the last year had been, so I used to be very overwhelmed with the amount of questions. So if you go to Lead Code, it currently has 1,700 questions.
Hmm.
What actually worked for me and helped me gain confidence in coding interviews was what I already have emphasized before in one of the earlier answers in the interview. It was actually understand the concepts behind these data structures and understand the patterns that
Okay.
underline a
Hmm.
particular problem. So there are a very few patterns to say, and there are many questions. So, for example, the pattern could be a merge intervals is a pattern, a
Hmm.
window sliding technique is a pattern. Uh, Find the, let's say, kth largest element in a BST is a pattern. So you just need to be mindful of these patterns that power up a
Definitely.
coding interview
Yeah.
question, and you need to just master them to gain confidence and composure in interviews. Because the last advice will be, interviewers actually value your critical thinking uh, over anything. And once you have the concept and the pattern, you know, to grasp over the concept of pattern, you can actually show off your critical thinking ability in interview. Uh, that's, I think, is the single biggest piece of advice that has helped me to uh, eliminate fear of these problem solving and data structure interviews. So yeah, uh, that's
Awesome.
one of my biggest, yeah, advices to you.
Awesome. Great. Okay, Pulkit, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your interview experience with all of us. Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike.